What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Wisconsin Investor Podcast. I am your host, Reese Brown, new voice behind the microphone today, filling in for Corey, and I am really excited about what we have to cover today. We're going to talk some numbers, some strategy, but most importantly, we're going to go back to the basics, and we're going to talk about why real estate is still the best tool to reach financial freedom, even as we're in 2026 here. But before we jump in, I want to give a quick shout out to today's show sponsor, Wisconsin Discount Properties. If you're looking for off-market deals in Wisconsin, this is your one-stop shop. Every single Monday morning, there are new off-market real estate opportunities that hit your email inbox. Guys, these are deals that you will not see on Zillow, you won't see on Realtor.com, the MLS. You're not going to see them anywhere. In 2025 alone, over 150 off-market deals were released. And a lot of people never even saw them because they weren't on the list. So if you want in, head to WisconsinDiscountProperties.com, click join the list in the top banner, fill out your info, and someone from the team will reach out. And a side note to this, if you're listening right now between Monday and Thursday, there are live deals right now waiting for bids. So don't wait. All right, without further ado, let's get into today's show. So before we dive into some of the strategies and some of the things I'm excited to talk about with you guys today, I want to start with something more important than all that. Something that Corey has talked about time and time again on this podcast, and that is the why. What brought you to be listening to this podcast right now? So a quick 30-second exercise you guys can do with me is ask yourself, why am I trying to build something with real estate? For me, it's simple. The reason I want to build something bigger is so that my wife does not have to work a full-time job. Right now, with us both working full-time jobs, our schedules are packed. We consistently feel like we're behind. The house is a mess. Someday we want to have kids, and we want to be more present at that time, right? We don't want to have to hire out to a sitter to raise our kid for us. So that is my why. Yours could look different, right? It might be freedom to travel, might be, less stress, more control over your schedule. But if you haven't defined that yet, it's a good time to pause for a second and think about it. Because at the end of the day, real estate, it's really not about money. It's about the options that it can create. So once your why is clear, the next question becomes, why real estate? And a forewarning, guys, some of this is going to feel elementary that we're talking about, especially to our seasoned investors, but that is the point. And I think this is even targeted to seasoned investors more. It's the point to kind of dumb this down and go back to the basics. I think it's an important reminder. But to get back to it, why real estate, right? Why not invest in the stock market? Why not put your money in a 401k? Why not just save more, play it safe? And instead of opinions here, I like to start with the history. So we're going to go back to the Battle of Midway, guys. We're going back to 1942. Not a great year because, the Allies started gaining traction over the Axis. It is a great year in my opinion because this is the year we started getting consistent data about real estate values appreciating year over year. 75-7. That is the record that real estate has had since 1942. 75 winning years, right? Years that values went up. 7 years where values decreased. And 5 out of those 7 years happened during the housing bubble in 2008. But including everything, on average, it goes up between 4 to 5% a year. Now you're probably thinking, 4 to 5%, man, the stock market is at 8% usually. And in recent years, it's been higher than that. But that's where the power of affordable leverage comes in. So, right, if we have $60,000, that $60,000 could potentially buy you a $300,000 property, 80% loan to value ratio. Now, if that property appreciates, we'll be conservative, we'll say 4%, It's a $12,000 increase, right, on the $300,000 property, 4% annual returns, $12,000 increase. But our investment is only $60,000, so it is a 20% return on our investment. And part number 3 is going to be the multiple ways to win. So, right, of course, we have appreciation. Right behind appreciation, just as important, I would say, is our equity pay down. So if we go back to that example, while you've earned $12,000 in the first year, you've also begun to pay down the $300,000, or excuse me, the $240,000 loan that you took out to buy that property, right? We have the other side, the 80% loan to value ratio. So we're also starting to pay that down, a huge portion that I think gets overlooked. Also, have value add opportunities, right? Think of the BRRRR method here. You have opportunities to fix up the property, whether it's in year 1 or a couple years down the road after renting it out. You have value add opportunities. And intentionally, last, we have optional, I call it optional cash flow, which is a part of real estate. A great part of real estate when you can make it work is the additional funds that you're making month over month. But like I said, guys, I know this is real estate 101. Like, we are going back to baby steps here. But I think it's a really important reminder that it's a system. It is not a single bet. And this system is not going anywhere in 2026. The system has been going for decades, and it's not going anywhere. So far, everything we've talked about, it makes, logical sense. However, somewhere along the way, in recent years, we have investors that, have kind of started analyzing deals based on cash flow and treating cash flow as what matters. And that belief, in my opinion, it's actually creating a pretty cool opportunity for the rest of us. And I will explain this through a segment that I like to call Who Cares About Cash Flow? So we're going to do this through an analogy using gold. We're dumbing it down again, guys. So let's say I have $20,000, right? Buy $20,000 worth of gold. Gold goes up 10%. I make $2,000. Option 2, I go to the bank. I say, hey, I want $100,000 worth of gold. I'll put $20,000 down. And we just talked about this leverage. I'll put $20,000 down, borrow $80,000 from the bank. Same gold, same 10% increase, but instead of the $2,000, you are making $10,000 now. All right, there's our leverage factor. So here's where it gets interesting. Imagine I have a friend, right? Friend comes up to me. Friend says, hey, I don't want to own gold. And I sure as hell don't want to save up $100,000. But I do kind of want gold, displayed in my house. I think it would look nice on the shelf. So my friend, he talks to me, he offers me a deal. He says, if you buy the gold, I will make every payment on your $80,000 loan. I'll pay you extra each month so you can cover your insurance and you can cover any maintenance, if you need to come back and shine it up or, fix the case it's in. I'll pay a little extra for those things. And we'll treat this like a long-term arrangement. So let's take that in, right? You put $20,000 down. Your friend pays $80,000 over time. During this time, the asset is appreciating. And at the end, you own 100% of it. Guys, that sounds insane. But that is exactly right. This is exactly how rental properties work. A lot of you knew that's where I was going with this. Right? And your friend, in this case, is a tenant. Now, imagine getting pitched a deal like this, right? Your friend's like, yeah, I'll pay the mortgage, I'll pay extra for the maintenance, I'll pay extra for insurance. And then you have the audacity to ask your friend, you're like, hey, I know you're paying for like 80% of this asset that I'm going to own 100% of after a while, but I kind of want like $300 a month as well, right? That's your cash flow. And guys, I know I'm going over the top here. I don't think that landlords with strong cash flow, I don't think they're greedy. But at the same time, if my friend told me, right, he's going to pay the loan, He's going to pay enough to cover insurance for the gold, and he's going to pay me extra to make sure I can maintain it. And then he tells me I'm not paying a dime more than that. What I would say to that is, who cares? Right? The debt is still being paid down. The asset is still appreciating, and the equity is still growing. Cash flow is the tip jar, guys. Equity is your real paycheck. So what makes this an opportunity in 2026, right? This is 101, right? This has existed forever. Well, I think where that opportunity comes in is because, we go back 4 or 5 years, right? Deals would hit the market. They would have multiple offers in a 24-hour period, right? Some investors were strategic and, were intentional at this time, picking these properties up. Some were just getting their start at the perfect time. But everyone who's lucky enough to win one of those bidding wars as an investor, they look like a genius. That wasn't sustainable, and I don't think it should have been. But what it created is investors that are now saying, hey, I'm not going to buy anything unless it cash flows, $500 a door. And believe me, I talk to investors all day, every day, and I have heard this time and time again. And I really don't see it as a problem. I see it as more of an opportunity, because we're going to have plenty of investors that are going to be waiting on the sidelines for a time that just is not coming. And that means there's going to be more investment opportunities in 2026 than we've seen before. And it won't take, some of these bidding wars. I mean, to me, the comparison here, right, of sitting on the sidelines and waiting for something like that again, say rents used to grow 6% every year, right? Now they grow 3%. So instead of taking the 3%, you're like, hey, I'm not going to let the tenants rip me off, man. I am not going to lease out, this unit until I get 6% more than last year. I don't think that is a savvy investor. I don't think that's conservative. It is simply the inability to adapt to a new market. So let's summarize this all up. If someone offered to help you buy a $100,000 asset, they pay 80% of the debt for you. They pay you extra to maintain it. And you just sit and let it grow in value. The question wouldn't be, does it cash flow? The question would be, how many times can I do this? And guess what else, guys? Guess what else we still have in 2026? We have dirty gold. So let's talk about dirty gold, right? The first example, we were talking about nice, shiny gold that we bought. Now, let's buy the gold that no one wants. Say we go buy some dirty gold for $70,000. We spend $10,000 cleaning it, polishing it up, fixing the display case. Now we're all in for 80 grand, right? So $70,000 purchase, $10,000 cleaning it, fixing it up, all in for 80. Gold looks amazing. We take it to the bank. The bank goes, wow, this gold, this looks really nice, right? This gold's probably worth $100,000. And I know last time we cut you a check for, 80% of the total value. So we'll cut you a check for $80,000. Right? A lot of you guys know where I'm going with this. But put $80,000 in, get $80,000 back. I own a $100,000 asset with none of my own money in the deal. This is 100% recycled investment. And it's BRRRR, of course. You guys knew where I was going with this. But we still have our friend in this equation. We still have a friend who makes the loan payments, pays you that extra money for insurance and maintenance. So now you have no money in the deal. The loan is still getting paid down. The asset is still appreciating. And you can do this again and again and again. And that is where the term, infinite return on investment comes from. And I think it's also important to remember, guys, sometimes when you're buying dirty gold, you won't pull all your money out, right? Sometimes the rehab on that dirty gold is going to be $20,000 instead of $10,000. So you're all in for $90,000 and the bank only gives you $80,000. But that is still an insane return on investment when you start to add up, the appreciation, the debt pay down, and those other factors. All right, guys, we've talked about leverage. We've talked about equity. We've talked about strategy. Now we can finally get to the fun part, taxes. Before I get into this, you don't need to know the ins and outs of these features at all to get started. And I'm not even going to talk about them because I don't really want to. I do not like this portion. But it is very important that you know that they exist. And the reason I'm sharing them is because tax advantages in real estate is what separates it most from other investment vehicles. And these tax advantages are not going anywhere. So while it is boring, it is very important, and it becomes more important as you build a portfolio. So number one is depreciation. Depreciation is the backbone of real estate tax efficiency. Even though properties are often going up in value, we just talked about since 1942, 4 to 5% year over year increases. So even though that is happening, the IRS allows you to depreciate the building over time as if it's wearing out. It's over a 27.5 year period. So on paper, you're allowed to show a loss even when a property is cash flowing, or if it's breaking even, you can show a loss. And this is obviously something you can't do with some of the other vehicles, like stocks and bonds and whatnot. Number two is bonus depreciation. And more recently here in 2025, 100% bonus depreciation. Again, we're not going to get into this too much, but what that allows you to do is instead of spreading out your depreciation over 27.5 years, you can accelerate that in the early years of ownership, all in the first year of ownership. So this is done through what's called a cost segregation study, and it creates larger deductions earlier on, which can improve cash flow and give you more capital to reinvest. And it's especially impactful if you plan to hold real estate long term. Number three is real estate professional status. So this is great for couples, right? Maybe couples who one is a high income W-2 earner and the other one, maybe works part-time. So what real estate professional status is as long as you're spending over half of your time or 750 hours in a year, working on your real estate business, maintaining properties, property management, fixing up properties, it changes how real estate income is taxed. And instead of it being passive, it is now active income. So losses now, or gains, right, are an active income instead of a passive income. And if we combine this with bonus depreciation, you can actually write off large portions of what one spouse might make in their W-2 income. The entire tax burden that you'd have from one earner can be written off with 100% bonus depreciation. Now, there are a lot of layers there, guys. I'm not a tax professional. Highly recommend talking to someone who is if you're at that point in your real estate journey. But to give an example, I've talked to people who have utilized real estate professional status, and they can't even tell me about it in much detail. So there are a lot of layers to it, but they can tell me, hey, I received a big check, when they got their tax returns back. So that part they know, but don't want to overwhelm you guys with needing to know all of these things before you get started, because even the people who are benefiting from it don't know these things sometimes. So number four is mortgage interest deduction, right? So early on in a loan, amortized over 30 years, a lot of those initial payments are going to be interest. And you're allowed to write that interest off in addition to your depreciation and, any expense write-offs as well. So any repairs or maintenance. And then the final one, 1031 exchange. So some of you guys have heard of this before. Again, not going to go into too much detail, but what this would allow you to do is if you have two properties, right? Say you have two single family homes and you really want a 4-unit, but you're thinking, well, hey, if I got to pay, long-term capital gains when I sell this to buy my 4 unit, it hardly makes sense at that point. A 1031 exchange allows you to defer those capital gains if you're buying more real estate. So a very cool tool that allows you to have more flexibility, utilizing bonus depreciation. So these can all layer, these tax benefits can, and that's where it's really important to talk to, a tax professional if you're at a point where you've got a few properties and whatnot. So, alrighty, to bring this all home, guys, let's talk about the last piece of the puzzle, a fitting ending. Talk about retirement and why real estate is, I think, the best retirement plan that is out there. So we combine things like leverage, we combine equity pay down, our recycled capital, all the tax efficiencies. We don't just build an income through that, we build options. And a rental portfolio can easily replace a traditional retirement. The example I like to go to is, a couple who owns, say they own 5 duplexes that they've paid off over time. Those 5 duplexes could generate, $70, $80, $100,000 a year in rental income once they're paid off. And that, could easily replace a traditional retirement account. So it is not 50, 60, 70 units that are needed. It is much more attainable to reach a point where rental properties are your retirement income. So with that, folks, retirement, a perfect place to wrap this up. We will end it here. If today's episode helped you reconnect with your why, or even challenged how you've been looking at deals, especially around cash flow, it did its job. So remember that it's not about knowing everything, doing everything perfectly. It's about starting, learning, staying intentional as you go along. And my hope is today gave you a clear picture of why real estate is still the main vehicle for building financial freedom in 2026, right? It's not just appreciation. It's not just cash flow, of course, but it's because of how leverage, equity, tax benefits, how all of these things can work together. We might not be in the same market we were a few years back, but this beautiful machine that we call real estate has shown resilience year after year, decade after decade, and it is not going anywhere. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Remember, if you want access to real off-market opportunities here in Wisconsin, you want to get this process started for yourself or keep it going, don't forget to check out our show sponsor, Wisconsin Discount Properties, and get on that list is wisconsindiscountproperties.com. New deals are dropping every Monday morning. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate you hanging out with me, and we will see you next time on the Wisconsin Investor Podcast.